Nathan, welcome.
John.
Now we've got an hour together. Now you've done the GC Index, so thanks for doing that. I have your profile. You haven't seen it yet. That's typically the way we approach reviews. So our task in the next hour is for me to talk you through your profile so that you understand it. And together we will tease out whatever implications we may see within that profile for you in your role and in the world of work. Now, in terms of confidentiality, just to be clear, this is for you. So our conversation is between you and I. You may choose to share your profile with other folk. That's up to you, but it doesn't go beyond me in this setting. If we get to the end of our hour and there's still stuff that you're interested in pursuing, let's think about setting up more time and we can do that. Now, a GC Index profile comes to life within context. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. It's fairly meaningless unless we can put it into the context of your life and your working life in particular. So that's where I would like to start before we look at your profile. Give me 5 to 10 minutes summary, please, of your career.
Relatively simple backgrounds. My parents, they ran quite a successful pub in the country, actually. So that's where I grew up. Found school quite easy, wasn't particularly academic, didn't really, but always got through quite comfortably, but never really liked school. Wanted to leave at 16, wanted to leave at 18 and so on. But parents said to carry on. Entered into the world of work for an organization. And then quickly moved to another organization, and it was a bit slightly larger. And I realised I wasn't enjoying it. I had success for about a year and a half, and it was fine. But I just knew that I didn't necessarily want to work for somebody else quite quickly. And that's when I was about 26 when a colleague who I'd worked with previously said they were thinking of setting something up. And so I did that, and I jumped at the chance. But a lot of people thought it was risky, and it was a startup, and you had to, leaving a well-paid job, what I was successful at, but I just had to get out of that world. And started a Sapphire business. That's a company called EG1. We did that with my colleague Andrew. Made lots of mistakes along the way, so it was always a bit of a roller coaster ride. And then in 2013, 2014, as you will know, John, of course, we started to research into the GC Index, and that was really quite exciting, actually. And that's what I do today. I lead as chief polisher the GC Index with your good self.
And those points, if you look back over that successful career, those moments where you felt most energized and engaged, what are the themes that emerge for you?
Certainly when I was free, when I wasn't being told what to do. I always remember a manager who was very astute, actually, and I was getting really frustrated with the boss, and we were in the pub, and he just said, I've watched you for the last 3 or 4 months. And he said, you don't like this, do you? You don't like people sort of, a company can't see through Zoom, someone poking your chest and telling you what to do. You always have an allergic reaction to that. So certainly I don't like being told what to do, particularly I like freedom to make my own mistakes, to make my own choices. That's when I'm at my best, when I can create something from nothing.
Yeah,
it's exciting, and I quite like the fact that it's either all or nothing, boom or bust. It's high stakes. Trying something new that no one believes you can do. So in a previous, the company before setting up EG1, a good example, actually, it's good to do this. It was selling technology. It was selling technology to the legal profession, and it was the best at it, probably. And so all of the big accounts in the legal sector were taken over by other account people, and I was given the not so good accounts. And so I decided to look a bit further afield, and I opened up their biggest account in Spain. They'd never been in Europe before, and I opened up the biggest Spanish account, to the point that they wouldn't even pay for my travel to go over there. I couldn't get the MDs over there for this big account. I just pay for it myself and expense, all that sort of stuff, going through the rules. And we landed it. And so I landed the account. Of course, then everyone was really happy with me and, oh, you're great and do this. And I was like, you didn't even want to know what I was doing. You had no interest, but only because now I've gone and done it. Are you being nice to me, if you like, or supportive of me? And yeah, I thought, I'm going to leave now, because but I really enjoyed that whole piece that everyone said it couldn't be done, and it could be done. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but
yeah, no, there are themes here that we'll pick up again around freedom and creativity, and see how that tracks into your profile. And at EG1, what were the energizing, engaging bits for you?
I think the blank sheet of paper, blank start. I think there's a couple of things really. I'd worked with Andrew, my colleague, and always felt that we could do something together. I think we both shared this notion that things in our industry need to be improved and could be better.
Yeah.
So, and that's why it was called EG1, really, by leading by example, first example.
Oh, right, lovely. Okay.
And so
you shared that.
Yeah, shared that
aspiration, if you like. Yeah.
Of quality and making things better. And I think we said something like, we weren't necessarily at that time going to change the whole industry, but we wanted to change our little corner. Yeah, and it was new. I mean, this is Doc and I've spoken about this before. Left a job, just bought a house, going to get married, all those good things where a lot of strain on finances, if you will. And then I just go and move away from not having a salary and just doing a startup, and I loved it. And everyone thought I was mad.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
We might return to that theme about the nature of risk for you and how you perceive it, but not for the minute.
Yeah.
Just fast forward. This is very useful context, really, for thinking about your profile. Fast forward, please, in terms of your aspirations, your ambitions.
I think for me, they're not monetary. They never have been. It's around fundamentally changing the world. I know that sounds quite grand, John. Sorry, but change the world in a way where there's legacy. So we're going to leave this mortal realm at some point, and I'd just like to have a little bit of a legacy. And I think that's my driver, really. That's what I'm more interested in.
So, well, thanks for that, Nathan. We'll return to some of those themes, I'm sure. So this is your profile. I will obviously send you a copy of this afterwards so that you can read it through. There's a lot in this profile that hopefully will interest you. As I say, my job is to walk you through your profile now so that you can understand it. And together we can begin to explore what it means for you. Now, my starting point with a review is always on this page 4 of your report, and the logic is very simple. This is the GC Index model. At one level, it's very straightforward, easy to understand. I'm going to walk you through it and you will get it, you will understand it. And then when you appreciate the model, it makes for a richer conversation for the two of us when it comes to looking at your profile and understanding what it means and tracking through the implications. So let me do this now. Let me talk you through the model. Now, so the GC Index started its journey in 2012. And it started with a question from the world of work, professional services primarily, who were interested in and continue to be interested in folk who can drive transformational change. What do they look like? What characteristics do they have? People that at the outset were tagged as game changers. And that started the quest, the exploration. What are these people like? Do they have defining characteristics? And the journey began with a series of research projects, just examining those questions, really. And what emerged as kept the GC Index on that journey because it was clear from a number of research projects that game changers do have defining characteristics that sit under two broad headings. One to do with a capacity for original thinking, the basis for creativity that we call imagination, and one to do with an obsessive, compulsive nature, a drive to turn ideas into reality. That's where the journey started. At the outset, it was very clear with an understanding of game changers that the GC Index was measuring energy for impact rather than personality as I'd known it for the last 2 or 3 decades in the form of MBTI and so on. And then through a series of pilot studies, the model grew and enabled us to answer questions like, but if you're sitting down here relative to these axes, where does your energy come from then? What's it about? What does it look like? How does it manifest? How is it channeled? So that theme is central to the GC Index. It's about where people have energy for making an impact. It's not about competence. It's not how good you are at that. It doesn't tell us about your skill set. It's not saying that there's an ideal profile, and that's why the context of your working life is so important. So we will constantly be thinking, how does this profile work for you in your world, and how has it underpinned your success? Let me talk you through it. Now, at some point, I'm going to ask you where you think your energy is on this model. And it will be to some extent a test of my ability to explain it to you, but let me talk you through it. So strategists and game changers share, they share an energy for ideas and possibilities. That's what engages them, but they're quite different folk. So our strategists are those individuals who seek to make sense of the world. That's where their energy is. Understanding the world, making sense of it. And typically that's a reflection of the way they look at patterns and trends in their world. Let me give you some examples that bring it to life. So a strategist could be an epidemiologist right now, looking at COVID-19 data, understanding the patterns within that data, using those patterns to predict the future, and those predictions will shape policy. We're seeing it right now in the UK and Europe in terms of travel bans and so on. This is what strategists can bring in terms of contribution. But it could also be a family therapist looking at patterns and trends within a family and making predictions about what's going to happen in terms of family dynamics. So it's not necessarily hard data. It could be hard data, it could be soft data, but the drive is the same. How do I make sense of what's going on in my world, often associated with the why question. Why has that just happened? What's this about? What does this tell us about the future and how we can predict it? Game changer energy is quite different and is not a product of what's happened in the past or a build upon history. It's about what's possible now, what's possible in the present, what's possible in the future, and will reflect a game changer's need for creative expression. Often for game changers, creativity is a powerful drive because it's an expression of their need to shape their identity in the world. When it comes to implementers and polishers, the energy is very much to do with task, delivery, getting things done. But again, these folk are quite different. So our implementers, you'd probably argue that they're the powerhouse of most organizations, deliver stuff, get stuff done, task-focused, outcome-focused, tick it off the list, move on to the next task, the next project. And they can do that with a degree of comfort around good enough. If it's good enough, move on. That's not something that polishers share. They will deliver for you, but their drive is quite different. For them, it's about quality, standards, rigor, doing something that the best they can. And if you see the words here, that's often to do with being proud of what they do deliver. So these are the folk that you typically want to point at tasks that require review, learning, continuous improvement, pursuit of excellence. And finally, our Playmaker completes this model and came about again through pilot studies we did with people who were saying to us, not sure my energy comes from ideas and possibilities like strategists and game changers all through completing tasks, but it comes from people, which initially sounded very cliched. But as you listen carefully to Playmakers, what they're describing is the energy that comes from taking responsibility for building consensus, cohesion in groups. That's at the heart of it. Cohesion often manifests as inclusion, involvement, building consensus in teams. So our Playmakers, it's not about driving their own agenda. It's about helping groups build a collective agenda that everyone can get behind. That's the model. These days, we present it this way too, for a number of fairly obvious reasons. The first being, the people who've been around organizations know that all of these contributions are important, valid, legitimate, needed, dependent upon the life cycle of a task, a project, a business. So it's affirming in that sense. It also allows for us to think about leadership in a different way. Using the GC Index model, it's not about being a leader necessarily in a formal sense that you have the title. It's about knowing when to take a lead in a team. So sophisticated game changers will know that at the outset of a project, ideas may be needed. That's when they can step up and take a lead in that sense. It also provides us with a language for thinking about complementary relationships. So if you ask a sophisticated implementer how they complement their strategist and game changer colleagues, they know. They'll say, listen, my role is as reality checker. Are these ideas feasible? Are they going to work? And if they are going to work, let's think about the plans and the actions to turn ideas into a reality. So in that sense, it's a very affirming model. And that's reinforced by, last slide on this, and then we'll get to your profile. This is reinforced by our view, and this is important when you look at your profile. It's reinforced by the view that leadership is not one-dimensional. There's no one way of doing it. We know that. We know Obama's different from Trump, is different from Biden. There are different ways of leading and being successful. And within our database, we have the evidence to support that. The fact that, your profile might show that you're a Playmaker polisher or a game changer Playmaker, given that most people have too high scores in their profile. And you can be successful, whether it's as a COO, CFO, MD, building upon energy, investing in the skills needed to develop that impact, energy for impact, is the basis for success. Now, before we get on to your profile, just to bear in mind when we look at the mechanics of your scores, when you complete the questionnaire, your responses are converted into what we call STEN, standard 10 scores. What does that mean? It means that for any one of the proclivities, strategist, game changer, I'll come back to Playmaker in a minute, implementer and polisher, you can have a score in that range of 1 to 10. And if we look at this diagram above, it simply gives you a view on the frequency within the general population of the scores in your profile. So if you've got a 10, you're going to share that with 2.5% of the population. Similarly, if you've got a 1, it's a rare score, given most scores fall in that middle range. So scores are independent of each other. The score for Playmaker is based upon an algorithm, and we may get into that. An algorithm reflecting in part what's going on in the other 4 proclivities. And I'll talk you through the logic of that when we get to it. So listen, that's you. That's the, let me go back up. That's the model. Where do you feel that you are? You may have a view of definitely where you aren't or where you are, but both. What's your take on how your profile might, what it might look like?
It's quite difficult to say, actually. So I think definitely ideas. I have lots of ideas. I've always been told, always had to take sort of a visionary, sort of strategic role within organisations that I've been, or within roles. Look at the future. It's quite interesting. Certainly working with an EG1 is always, what's the strategy, what's the plan, what we're doing. And yeah, I mean, I think certainly the excellence bit rings true. I mean, obviously the quality is probably, but we do get things done as well. I do get a lot of stuff done. So I don't know if that means I'm more of an implementer or not, but I do get things done.
So ideas plus getting things done, but not sure in what combination that might manifest.
Yeah, I mean, it's be interesting to find out, actually.
So Nathan, this is you. This is your profile. Let me give you the headlines, and then we can explore it together, and you can tell me what resonates and what doesn't. So big scores on this right-hand side for Polisher and Game Changer. There were some of the things you talked about in your introduction that feel consistent with that, but let's check it. That Polisher energy that you realized that you were bringing to EG1, actually, that we can do this better. There's a better way of delivering these services, I think you talked about, and that constant focus on improvement is what you'd expect of polishers, not being comfortable with good enough. Right. It's a strong school, though. I mean, I don't know what you make of that.
So 10's quite big, isn't it?
10's quite big. Yeah, it will suggest that if this is true of you, right, that there is a strong drive to, must try harder, must do better, must make sure we deliver something we can feel proud of, potentially. But tell me how it lands with you.
Yeah, it does. In some ways, I mean, I think things have got to be right, whatever right means. This has to be right. It doesn't mean that I have to be right necessarily, but things have to be right. And I don't, I think that I sometimes get myself into trouble with that sometimes, because people think that I'm being quite difficult and that I have to be right, that I'm the one. But no, if it's someone else's idea or someone else does something, I'm very happy with that. It just has to be right. And I can't explain what right means, though, unfortunately. It's almost a feeling rather than.
And it feels binary. Is that how it feels to you, that there's a right way of doing something, or there's?
Yeah, I've always been described as very black and white. You know, it's this or the other, and I think I've always been. I'm quite all in or all out as well. In the way that I approach things. If we're going to do something, we're going to do it. Yeah, and can't just mess about and do something half-heartedly. I'd rather not do it at all. Yeah.
So if it is that, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well.
Yeah.
For you, but presumably there's also. Does it feel this way to you? A real clarity then about what you're seeking to achieve, coupled with a commitment to that. I don't want to put words, but
No, I mean, I don't know if this fits, but I can be quite indecisive. So I can look at different things and I can be seen to
yeah,
be quite indecisive.
yeah,
Once I've made my decision, I'm very incisive. That's it, right? That's what we're going to do. That's the right thing to do. And it's very difficult to take me off of that course once
yeah.
we're on it.
So there's a flip somewhere between exploring all sorts of options.
Yeah.
Then when you've got that, okay, this is the right thing to do,
Yeah.
then there's a different sort of single-mindedness to it.
And I've always been able to do that quite quickly as well. So I think some people said before I have a bit of a bookmaker's brain. I'm not sure that's for any non-English speaker. I'm not sure if they understand what that might mean, but I get to that quite quickly as well. And I often find myself at the end of what we need to do before people don't necessarily follow what I'm doing sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I've got all the possible things in my head. This is, and then right, this is what we should do.
We're moving into game changer a little bit. Let's just do that.
Okay.
But
is that what that is? That's the game changer.
Yeah, but just to capture this polisher energy, then it feels like that's part of what's underpinned your success so far. Any downside to that?
Yeah, yeah, a lot actually. I think. Yeah, I've there's a number of things. I always remember when we were doing something, getting to work, doing something. I remember Andrew, my colleague, always going, "Oh, I felt a bit scared of calling up, saying I've got a bit of a cold. I know Nathan will be in anyway, or Nathan will carry on. And if I've got a broken leg, Nathan will still be in with 2 broken legs. It's just quite relentless.
Yeah.
Which has its place, of course, but it's not for everyone.
It's something we may pick up possibly on another session, but you'll read in the report how, and it's of a piece, but as you might expect, polishers set high standards for themselves. They set high standards for others. They can be inspirational in that regard. They can also be very inhibiting, which I think is what your stories.
Are they quite critical, John?
Yes, critical. Yeah. Well, I mean, what's interesting about polishers being self-critical, it's not the self-criticalness that leads to inertia. Oh, I can't do this. It's the sort of self-critical bit that says, yeah, and come on, let's do it better. Let's improve on it. Let's raise the bar, whatever language you choose to use around that.
I've been known to kill a room or two quite quickly by saying a couple of things that appeared to be quite negative to everyone else. And sometimes I know when I'm doing it, but I can kill a room. And in terms of going, well, that's just not going to work. That's rubbish. Yeah. And it just stopped. You could see everyone just stopping around me and thinking, just get out, because we're having quite a nice time, actually. So that's why I wonder about the critical nature of what you're describing.
Yeah, I think it potentially is another conversation, but if you're trying to actually sort out those who want to take on the challenge and those who don't, that's a pretty good way of doing it. Right. Really, to set a really high bar of expectation. Let's come on to game changer, and then we can see how they all work together. But so in your description, you talked about the freedom to be creative, wanting to change the world, which is more than just improving things, and this theme of legacy. And game changers typically do have a drive for creative expression that seems to be part of your working life, but help us to crystallize it.
Well,
give an example of.
It's interesting. I would never call myself particularly creative. I'm no good at music. I'm no good at art. I can't draw. Yeah. Anything that you would see. My wife is great at doing design and looking. I'm not particularly creative. So, I mean, I'd like to know a bit more about that one, actually. I wouldn't see myself as particularly creative.
The way to think about it, and you're right to sort of broaden the conversation, because, traditionally perhaps we think of creativity in those ways. And what I've learned with with the GC is actually that's a very narrow view of the world.
Right.
That creativity can happen in all sorts of ways in organizational settings, from organizational design through to running a training workshop on whatever. I think at the heart of it, the essence of it is about originality. If you go back to the dimensions, is those original thoughts that can be manifest as, oh, this is something new, this is something different.
Yeah, I've often been seen as, not, I wouldn't say weird, I want to say that's, but people look at me sometimes when I say something and like an idea, or, and you know, I don't know, I think that sometimes I for sure I get my ideas are often things that other people haven't thought of, and that can get me into trouble sometimes, actually, if I'm not careful.
Well,
Well,
maybe that ties in.
It did at school, that's for sure.
I was wondering about that. Maybe it does tie in with that freedom bit, and why that freedom to be creative is important for you. And as soon as you're feeling sort of closed in somewhere, I love the description of someone sort of prodding you on the chest. As soon as you feel closed in, then time's up. And
I don't like being, I can't be in a box. Absolutely, that would just, I can't.
You're not on your own with that, and some very talented game changers, just very good at reinventing themselves, moving on, finding a place where they can thrive. But listen, we've got to look on this left-hand side, because as I mentioned up front, high scores aren't necessarily strengths, and we've touched on a little bit of that with Polisher. Low scores aren't necessarily a weakness. Any sense of how, so implementers are those folk who are comfortable with getting things done, comfortable with good enough, comfortable with routine tasks typically. This one here, how does that play out for you?
Well, routine tasks, don't like routine tasks, I must say, just for the sake of it, but I do get things done. You said like implementers like to get things done. I get a lot of stuff done. Yeah, and so I suppose that bit's not landing with me too well. Why I've only got a 1 there when I get things done. I get a lot done.
Yeah, and is it that you get a lot done as a polisher?
Right, I see what you mean.
Because I'm also thinking about you saying, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yes.
Which is a slightly different mindset to let's just get it done, whatever, and get it out the door.
That's probably true, actually, because if I don't think something's important, I won't do it. Right. I won't do it, and I'll put it off. And actually, when I come to do things, I just put things almost that, at least when I know I'm in an your terminology, implementing mode, I just put those things that actually that's not very important. So, but it's important to that person. I better do it now, because I'll never do it. I just won't do it. So I almost like bring it to, I suppose that's really learned behavior. Yeah. It could be something quite innocuous. And I thought, I better do that.
I mean, one of the other ways of exploring it, and talking to implementers, they do like their to-do list, because for them it's about, okay, I've got a task, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to bring some real energy to it, and then move on. Is that the way you manage your? No,
I can't write to-do lists.
Because
I start them, but I can't tick anything off.
Because
well, it's never quite finished, is it? There's always something else to do after something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think what you are describing, I mean, don't let's be misled here. Polishers get stuff done. It's just about their degree of comfort with standards, quality. Is it ever finished? Is there another iteration? And it seems to be that that's what you're.
So that all in, all out thing that I'm thinking is reflected in that 1 implementer and 10 polisher. That's because it is very binary for me.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing there. Okay.
Yeah. And if something feels like just an arbitrary task that needs doing, no doubt you'll get into some of them. But even when it comes to stacking the dishwasher, you might do it in a way that polishers do, rather than just.
Yeah.
But yeah, and let's just pull in those other two scores. So Playmaker 2.
Well, that's the one that jumped out at me the most, if I'm honest, because I'm sorry to say, Jim, I'm actually quite a nice bloke.
Yeah.
So I'm quite friendly,
Yeah.
quite diligent, and
Yes.
I'm a nice guy. So I'm I'm not to say offended by the
Yeah.
two, but certainly I'd like you to unpick that a bit more for me.
Yeah. Okay. And again, that's quite a common response, really, that there's a confusion between being a playmaker and personal qualities, and it's separating those two out that's key here. If you look at the behaviors of playmakers, their approach is around involving and including people in a way that builds the agenda. The reason why your 2 is as a 2 is your profile suggests that when it comes to leading, you will lead as a game changer or polisher. Well, essentially, you will have ideas, you will have a view, and sometimes they will be black and white views. Yeah. And the notion of you sitting around saying, "What do you think?" Isn't quite consistent with being a playmaker, and hence that's what we might expect of that score. So they tend to be folk who aren't driving their own agenda. They're seeking to drive the collective agenda in that involving and inclusive way, and with a patience that goes with that.
It's interesting you mentioned that thing about opinions. I often get told, you think you're always right, and that really annoys me because I don't think I'm always right. And back to what I said before, I think I want to, or what I think is right doesn't mean that I'm always right. Is what is right, and that's probably I need to learn a bit to do that better. But yeah, if people haven't, I don't have any time for opinions for opinions' sakes. Now, if I've got good opinions and it's really great, lovely, but normally 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, I disregard most of them because I don't think they're right. So it's quite interesting. That would really drain me if I had to sit around and just listen to lots of people's opinions for a long period of time.
Yeah. So how do you manage that bit then in a leadership role? Have you found ways of?
So I don't know. It's not so I disregard people's opinions. Of course I listen to them and I love it. I love having people's opinions coming in, but eventually I need to decide whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's right or wrong. So I listen,
Yeah.
but ultimately I will have a view of if this is the right thing to do or not.
Yes. So your view might be shaped by ideas, but you will decide for yourself what, rather than it being.
I won't make a decision by consensus. I won't go, do you agree? Do you agree? Do you? Well, 5 of us agree. Yes. No.
That would be a big risk for you, wouldn't it? Because the risk is that you'd end up feeling, we're not doing the right thing, and we're not doing the right things right. Yeah. Yes, I can see the risk of compromise.
That's compromise, yeah. I'm not, and it doesn't have to be my idea. It doesn't have to be I'd like to listen. Someone have a great idea, great, build upon that. That's the right thing to do. That's what we're going to do. Yeah,
yeah. Doing the right thing and doing it right is a feature, isn't it, of your profile? Okay, and finally, this strategist score of 4, it suggests. If we think about strategists wanting to think things through and look for patterns and trends and so on, it would suggest that actually it's not really your nature to overthink things, to overanalyze. But is that true?
Well, you were mentioning right at the beginning about how these are described, how you describe these proclivities, and they like to make sense of the world and see the world. I think I do that. I think I could see the world pretty clearly. Yeah. And I'm always looking to see how things fit in and how patterns happen. But I think when I then try and describe that to somebody else, I find that really difficult, or they don't really understand what I'm talking about. Probably like this interview. But the point is that there's, I can see quite clearly in my head, but when it comes out of my mouth, and I have to tell someone 2 times or 3 times, it really does quite drain me a little bit, and I don't give it that structure. I get called unstructured quite a lot. I get
Right.
called confusing quite a lot.
Yes. Your
Um,
experiences of seeing things that other people don't quite see, or
uh, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't see things that other people don't see. Maybe the way that I see it, I can't explain it to other people. So let's give you an example. If I look at like a blank sheet of paper, I see a blank sheet of paper with dread. If you ask me to put all my thoughts and put it into a plan, don't one after the other,
yeah,
I find that really difficult.
yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
if you give me I always remember trying to have to put a 1-year strategy together or a 2-year sales strategy. And you're like, well, anything could happen.
yeah.
Anything could happen between in month 2 or month 3, and
Oh,
this strategy is a waste of time.
right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I can probably see how the year is going to pan out if it's a sales year or a business year. I can sort of see it in my head, but to actually put it down on a piece of paper.
So putting energy into a strategist way of thinking would appear futile to you because that's just not the way you see the world.
No,
Yeah.
because it'll go wrong. I mean,
Yes.
there was Eisenhower or something once said, the most strategies are useless, but the process of strategy is invaluable. I'm not sure
Yes.
I agree. I'm not even sure I agree. The process of strategy is valuable, but colleagues will disagree. And
Yes. And also potentially having a structure and a strategy is a constraint on that freedom that you were talking about
yeah,
earlier to seize opportunities or possibilities to be creative or
yeah, I think I see it. I have strategist colleagues, and I think where it becomes valuable, probably where I do have blind spots, is around prioritizing, particularly what we're
yeah.
doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas I would,
We're at that point then now where it will be useful to distill some of the so what. So from this conversation, if there were a couple of things that you would want to continue to think about, bearing in mind that the GC index is about energy for impact, the whole point of a review is to think about how do you continue to improve, maximize your impact in the world. What would those two themes be for you that you would want to log somewhere and say, that's worth thinking about in terms of my impact?
it makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense to me. I think particularly looking at the playmaker bit, for example, makes a lot of sense to me because I've always been confused with being a nice bloke, but people do drain me after a period of time. So I always wonder why that was. I've been called relentless often. So this puts this into context, and of course I've been put as unrealistic often as well. So that probably fits with the game changer bit. So for me,
You're doing a typical polisher bit of picking out the negatives first and being
no. So
critical. Yeah,
well, you're right. So for me,
give us some balance.
that was my next piece. So for me, recognizing that is helpful, and going to play to my strengths, understand why I am like I am. It's been very helpful for me actually, and understanding that. I think, how's it going to help me? More actually interesting about other people, actually, how other people might perceive me and how I can manage those boundaries. Actually, I've always followed the notion that a gentleman is never unintentionally rude, and I think this just helps me keep doing that, not by mistake upsetting someone or by mistake doing the wrong thing. This helps me to.
To what end? Why would you want to pick on
Um,
that one?
why do I do that? Because there's probably a time and a place for ideas and improving things.
Yeah,
And
gotcha.
rather than just going in and chucking in bombs at the wrong time, maybe where that just has a negative effect to everybody. I
Yeah.
mean, unless you really have to stop something or really have to change something, fine, but it's not often the case. It has to be so radical so quickly. So maybe not chucking in bombs when into conversations or into process when they're not needed, and
Yeah.
saving that time to use that creativity and that polishing that in
Nice.
a
Yeah.
much more positive way. That's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say.
So an awareness of when to bring this
Correct. Yeah.
world, whether it's the creative game changer or the innovative, relentless polisher,
Yeah.
just timing your intervention. Do you mean so that they can
Yeah.
land with people?
Yeah. Not just to burst people's bubbles very quick with and stop them doing something they've worked really hard on, or be criticizing so quickly, and actually use it as a point of inspiration rather than
Yes, that has
inspiring rather than inhibiting. Yeah.
more chance of having some traction with those things that are in your head. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Good. Well, Nathan, thanks very much for thinking that
Do I
through.
get a copy of this? Do I?
You will get a copy of this, and I'm sure you will continue to think about this. And as I say, don't sit on anything. If there's things you want to pick up and explore some more with those themes, then make sure that you let me know, and we can talk again.
John, thanks very much. That was great. Thanks for us indeed.